What up, Joe? This is Gangrel, the Vampire Warrior. Man, I just wanted to give you a shout out across the big pond over there in Tokyo, man. I hope you're doing some fanging and banging. And I'm sure they miss you back in Connecticut, but you're moving on, you're doing your thing. So you just keep fanging and banging out there 24/7.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome to episode 71 of Halfway Through the Heat, the world's greatest, largest, longest running, and most critically acclaimed pro wrestling podcast that's also trans-Pacific. I am joined today by my co-host, Tom. Tom, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I am spectacular, as... you have not watched it right now, but people watching this video have just seen a video message I received for Christmas, which is a personalized message from former WWE wrestling vampire Gangrel. And that was orchestrated by Tom. So, thanks. Best part of Christmas was that message, so good thumbs up for that. But
it was my Christmas gift to you and to everybody out there in Halfway Through the Heatland.
But also, we are going to be talking about our best of this year. So this is just not a best of Halfway Through the Heat, because every episode is the best of, but a best of wrestling for the year. So we are going to be talking about some of our favorite things that happened, our favorite wrestlers, favorite stuff that happened this year. So that's gonna be it. That'll be our episode. We don't have any news, right?
We don't have any news. I mean, there's nothing all that exciting happening. I also honestly, normally always we say something positive about Raw, but I was coming home from visiting family on Monday. I was in a car accident, and so I did not get a chance to watch Raw. I'm okay. Everybody's okay. My car, which was hit from behind, is not okay. The Halfway Through the Heatmobile is not okay. So I didn't get a chance to watch Raw, although I did hear good things about it.
I didn't watch it either. I was busy.
So yeah, we're going to completely break from the norm, and we're just going to break down the best of the last 12 months. You know, there's a lot of talk in social media about how 2016 was the worst year ever. First of all, I think that's an anachronistic view of the world. I mean, World War II did not take place during 2016, so that's already one up on other bad years.
Remember when World War I had trench warfare for like a year?
Yeah, 1945 had 2 nuclear weapons used against civilian populations, which is, that's bad.
But Carrie Fisher died, Tom.
But Carrie Fisher did die. But so here's the thing. 2016 might have been a bad year for a lot of reasons. But was it a bad year in the world of grappling? I submit that it was not.
Yeah, it definitely was not, because 2015 actually was, and especially when we're considering the WWE, 2015 was much worse.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of things got better this year.
Some things got worse.
Some things got worse. Some things got better and then got worse.
That's true.
But let's start with the positive, because that's what we do here. We push out the negative, we bring in the positive. And let's start by awarding the most sought-after accolade in the world of professional wrestling, the Halfway Through the Heat Best Wrestler Awards.
Yeah, the Best Wrestler Awards. That's... We are mostly in agreement for all of these categories.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising because normally we so heatedly disagree. We'll start with the best wrestler, men in WWE. That's our first category. The best male wrestler in WWE. And last year we both agreed that it was John Cena. 2015 was the year of John Cena.
It's true. 2016 was not the year of John Cena, though, because he was mostly not wrestling.
Right. When he did wrestle, he was fine. But it could not have been his year again because he was AWOL for most of it. However, once again, we agreed the unanimous halfway through the heat best male wrestler of the year WWE category, AJ Styles, the phenomenal one.
The phenomenal AJ Styles has done nothing but good stuff in since his appearance in the WWE, and even before that, he was probably had one of the Match of the Year contenders at Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, this was not even a hard. This took almost no deliberation whatsoever. Credit, of course, goes to WWE for actually using him the right way, because they don't always do that with stars. But he has delivered on big stages and small stages. Every time he's had to come up with a great match, he's come up with a great match. He's had the best matches in WWE of the year. He's been a really compelling and interesting champion. Like, whenever AJ Styles is on TV, I don't change the channel. I don't look away. I don't get distracted and do something else. I want to see what's happening with AJ Styles. He even did the James Ellsworth thing, which could have become like a really dumb comedy sideshow. That really came across well, I think, largely because Styles played it so straight. I don't have a bad word to say about his time in WWE, and I think it's so great because he had never worked in the company before. And he came in from what a lot of people thought of were smaller stages like TNA and the Indies. And like from day one, when he showed up at the Royal Rumble in January, he's just delivered on all the promise and all the hopes that people could have had for what AJ Styles would do in WWE.
That's true. Not only did he deliver, WWE let him.
Yes.
Which is nice. Usually that doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. Or like they start out great, like Kevin Owens starts out great, and then they just kind of flounder, and then they get. I mean, like there's no stop-start push with Styles. They've done everything right and haven't screwed up once.
Yeah, they haven't made him into a wrestling plumber or something, so it's
right.
It's good.
Yeah, they didn't strand him in the mid card and pointless feuds. I can honestly only think of one bad match he had. It was against Jericho. It was just a weird off night for both of them. But like every other match, every big match on TV and on the pay-per-views, he's just been great. He's usually been the highlight of the show. So now we come to it. Our next category is best male wrestler from outside the WWE. There was dissension on this one.
There was dissension, but it's not like we disagreed. I mean, we didn't have the same person, but we both thought these guys had a great year.
So tell us who you chose.
I chose Hornswoggle. No, I did not choose Hornswoggle.
Swoggle. It's Swoggle.
Just Swoggle, sorry. I chose Kenny Omega, who has had a phenomenal year for himself, who is going to be headlining Wrestle Kingdom. I mean,
yeah.
He went from sort of a mid-card and New Japan dude to like headlining Wrestle Kingdom. It's big news. He's had a great year. He's had a lot of good matches, and I assume that his, match at Wrestle Kingdom will be amazing. Because usually, if you watch Wrestle Kingdom, all the matches are amazing.
He really benefited from Styles going to WWE more than I think anyone else in New Japan.
Yeah, he just basically became the AJ Styles replacement in New Japan. So when AJ Styles left, Kenny Omega had all the doors open.
And credit to Kenny Omega too, because a lot of people were really skeptical that he could actually be the guy after Styles left, because they saw him as a comedy guy or as a mid-card guy or just someone who couldn't deliver on that level. And I think you're right. I think he's had a tremendous year, and he's surpassed a lot of people's expectations.
Yep, he's been having a good year. He's been doing good stuff. So Kenny Omega gets the coveted best wrestler other category. Other as in not WWE.
For mine, I chose the villain, Marty Scurll, who was another guy. When you think about it, at the beginning of 2016, for most people, he was the British wrestler who was not Zack Sabre Jr.
Will Ospreay?
or Will Ospreay. And in the course of 2016, Scurll became like the dude. He won Bola. He became the Progress champion. He was in Sports Illustrated. He was all over the place. He signed with Ring of Honor.
He also has a pretty badass fur coat. That's all I'm saying.
He has an incredible fur coat. He does have an incredible fur coat. And one of the things I like about Marty Scurll so much is he's a very, very old-fashioned wrestler. Like he can work, in a fast-paced indie style, but a lot of the stuff he does, like from his whole persona, the guy who comes out with the fur coat and the umbrella and hates the fans, to like the submission holds he uses in the ring, like very old school submission holds.
He does the finger bending. He does the finger bending.
He does the finger bending. He does the crossface chicken wing.
Yeah, see? Perfect.
That stuff would have worked 50 years ago, and it works now. Like, you don't have to really know much about who he is. Like, you don't need a lot of backstory. He works a room, like, from the ground up. And I got to see him wrestle in Evolve in person this year, and he was the highlight of the show. He's like a guy who had a lot of personality and really stood out. And I think he's just done so much to establish himself as, like, a really distinctive, really interesting, compelling wrestler in a short span of time. So Marty Scurll gets the coveted best male wrestler outside the WWE nod from me.
Good choice. It's a good choice.
Yeah, Kenny Omega and Marty Scurll, good choices. Our next category, let's go over to the distaff side, the ladies, and let's start with the best wrestler who was a woman in WWE. And now this sort of tips our hand here, but we also include NXT in this because they're all getting paychecks from Stanford.
Yes. So we for this category, we both chose Asuka, who was my choice last year, and she remains my choice this year because basically, the other good women wrestlers who were in NXT have gone up to WWE and basically floundered. I flopped around, did some stuff that was passable. But, Asuka still continues to amaze with great matches, probably with people who probably shouldn't have great matches.
Yeah, this was a unanimous choice this year. Last year I said Sasha Banks, but I think Asuka, this is the year she beat Bayley for the championship. She's been the champion basically the whole year since WrestleMania. And even though there's not much competition in the division, they've worked hard to get Asuka out there, and she's had some really good matches. Like her match against Mickie James was really, really good. Just a fantastic match at NXT TakeOver Toronto. And she's super popular. Again, who knows what happens when she gets to the main roster, but NXT, they have done everything right. They have her merchandise, like you can get the masks and the t-shirts, and who would have thought that you have a wrestler who doesn't really speak English that well, but who just goes out and wrestles really well and has a very distinctive presentation and style, and that gets over with the fans. Like, imagine that. That people just like a colorful character who wrestles well. And they've done well in letting her do her thing, and she's just been the most compelling thing. Honestly, with a couple of exceptions, she's the best thing on the NXT roster this year, male or female.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, there's not really many other choices. Apparently, American Alpha beat the Wyatts to become the SmackDown Tag Champions.
That's right. And John Cena came back tonight.
Wow, so much excitement going on in SmackDown.
So much excitement on SmackDown. For women on the main roster, like this isn't an award, but honestly, of all the NXT women who went up, I'm much more interested in Nikki Bella than I am in like Sasha, Bayley, or Charlotte. Like I know that makes me that will alienate internet nerds, but I think Nikki Bella is just a more interesting character right now. But the WWE Woman of the Year, getting the coveted halfway through the heat award, is Asuka. Our next category, of course, naturally, is the best woman wrestler from outside the WWE. And once again, there's unanimity. There's total agreement.
This was good because this was a person who we thought had the most entertaining matches, stood out the most, did stuff that was worth watching, and always ended up at the bar.
We are talking, of course, about Su Yung, who has completely remade herself, where she had like kind of a goofy, geeky girl character before. She's remade herself as this like weird, terrifying, semi-undead ghost woman, and has had like insanely entertaining brawls, usually in Shine, but also in other promotions. Um, where basically the whole point of the match is seeing how much incredible punishment she can take. The outcome doesn't. I mean, she wins, she loses. It doesn't really matter. It's just like one insane spot after another. And as Joe mentioned, it usually goes to the bar with her opponent like smashing full beer cans on her head over and over, or like getting like pedigreed onto thumbtacks on the bar. It's nuts. But for someone who didn't show a lot of promise a couple of years ago, and who was like an interviewer in NXT before that, she's turned into like a fearless, like really fun wrestler to watch, and brings a lot of theatrical style to it, like her makeup, her presentation, the fact that she does the red mist. I am a sucker for all mist in wrestling.
I'm with you. I love mists. My somewhat related in my story in our book, Three Moves of Doom, which you should buy on Amazon,
Good.
is involves red mist, or it involves the Asian mist. It involves the
Yeah,
mist. So that's the thing.
yeah. It was a great year for Su Young. She was usually the highlight of every card she was on. I still haven't seen her live, which is a bummer, but um, I do enjoy watching her on Shine, and expect big things in 2017 from her. Um,
Oh, Tom, I
what?
can't believe you just did that to Su Young.
Yeah, we'll talk about my the mixed blessing of me predicting big things for you on our next week's episode, where our look ahead will hopefully not force anyone else to get a 10-month injury. Um, Moving on from the singles wrestler, let's talk about some tag wrestlers. This was actually kind of hard because there are not a lot of great tag teams right now. We're in a fallow period for tag team wrestling.
Yeah, it was hard. The WWE was not hard. That
No.
one we chose immediately. But the outside of WWE, tag wrestling is, kind of hard to. It's kind of hard to pick people. I thought I was gonna have to pick. There was a brief moment where I thought like it's got to go to the Rock and Roll Express.
I mean, there are tag team matches on every card, but more often than not, the quote unquote tag teams are just like two guys who are thrown together that night. They're not like a real team,
Yeah.
so
So
it's difficult. But as you said, our first category is the best tag team in the WWE, and we once again, unanimously chose the Revival. There's a lot more unanimous agreement this year than there was last year, by the way.
that's true.
Uh,
Last year we had almost no unanimous agreement except for maybe John Cena.
John Cena. We picked the Revival, uh, and what do you like about these guys?
The Revival are a lot of the in a lot of ways they're like the way you described Marty Scurll earlier, in that like they do things that like they could they could be they could be wrestlers from like top wrestlers from the territory days, and
Yep.
they do all that same stuff and they still get over with it now. Just kind of shows you that the way, you know, the kind of classic way of wrestling still works. Um, they're just so good. They really do remind me of like an old Southern wrestling tag team, and it's like the kind of thing where like they do it so well, and they get like, like they do things that are like very subtle, I think too. If you remember in the match that they had with wait, who did they have the match with? Oh, t- wait, Tommaso Ciampa and
Yeah,
Johnny
DIY.
Gargano, DIY. They had
Yeah,
that. They had a match with them. Did they? They lost the titles, right?
that's right. The 2 out of 3 falls match. Yeah.
So in that match, there was a point where like, like the Revival held up the belts to block a kick.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing is like really, it's really like kind of old school wrestling. That kind of like, um, there's a point where like, and for DIY's credit also, they played a very old school kind of. It was like basically a very old school kind of match. It had, um, Johnny Gargano as like the kind of Ricky Morton, like
Yep.
dude getting beat up the entire match you feel sorry for.
Yeah.
Um, and the Revival just work so well together in that like they're really good at being like the kind of old schoolish heels that you want to dislike, but and they do things like the belt, hold up the belt to be as a shield, that kind of thing. It's really pretty interesting.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, they really seem like two guys who just stepped out of an episode of Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1981. And the only hard part about this category for me was deciding if it was them or DIY. And ultimately, I think the Revival gets the edge just because they like are a perfect tag team. It's hard to imagine them as singles competitors because they work so well together. Inevitably, because it's WWE, they're going to get split up at some point. But right now, they have just had match after match after match. That's incredible. And there are two big feuds this year with American Alpha and DIY. Like, we don't have a feud of the year category, but those would both be competitors for that because both were so good. Every match was great. The in-between match stuff, the interviews were so great. Like, the Revival they just get it. And like, from the start, they just know what they're doing and they do it really well. And it's all too rare to see that. Like, there's no one on the main roster, no tag team on the main roster that comes close to, like, how well these guys know what they're doing in wrestling.
It's true. They're just so good, and I think like American Alpha is good, but they're not the Revival.
No, and I think they got called up too early. I think if they had stayed in NXT a little bit longer, they would have gelled more as a tag team. They're like, even SmackDown, which is sort of better than Raw in terms of booking, like, they still don't really know what they're doing in tag teams, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard to. It seems hard for them to get tag teams over.
Except for today.
Well, there's not. Yeah, I mean, but there's nothing that's really like a tag team that people are really that like seem like a real competitors as only a tag team. Like what I mean. There's not like a modern equivalent to Demolition.
No, there isn't, and part of it is, I think, the WWE like is too attached to the idea that if you're going to be a top guy, there has to be a comedy side to you. Like, what made Demolition and the Road Warriors like so compelling is like there was nothing funny about them. They seemed like these just really nasty dudes who wanted to get in there and hurt people. And that's one of the reasons I like the Revival so much. There's nothing funny about the Revival. Like, they don't have like a jokey we're the Revival, like they're like, we're just here to wrestle. And it just seems that when you get in the main roster, that goes out the window, and there's got to be like a ha ha he he side to things, with a few exceptions. Like, the Wyatt family has managed to avoid that, but like it's one thing if you're sort of predisposed toward it and you can do it well, like the New Day, and it's another thing when they're forcing it on you and it's clearly not working, like with the Club. So I think, if they're not willing to have a tag team that's just like two badass dudes who like fighting, they're not going to get over with the fans. They just don't get it that not everybody has to be D-Generation X. In fact, nobody should be D-Generation X.
Not even D-Generation X, really.
Not even D-Generation X. Our next category, no unanimity here, but both good choices. This is the best tag team from outside the WWE. Tell us who you chose.
So, let's see. I chose Los Ingobernables de Japón, which is, of course, the faction in New Japan Pro Wrestling who is, run by Tetsuya Naito. It's good stuff.
This was a hard choice.
This was a hard choice. Finding tag teams outside of WWE was a really hard choice because in Los Ingobernables is like a not really a tag team so much as a faction, but they sometimes wrestle as tag team, so we counted it. It was hard to think of tag teams that had done anything outside of WWE though, that were legitimate tag teams, not like two random guys put together. If someone wants to make an argument for the Rock and Roll Express, who wrestled one match this year,
I picked the Young Bucks, who I also picked last year. I think if anything, they had a better year this year. they've really become the top U.S. stars who are outside WWE, which is fascinating because they it's just indies and New Japan. That's where they work. And I mean, ROH is kind of an indie, but they've never been on the big stage, and they make a lot of money and they're huge stars, which is fascinating to me. And they're also a lot of fun to watch. Like I saw 2 Young Bucks matches in person this year, and they were great. My ringtone is a crowd chanting Young Bucks. They're just I mean, like, they do what they do so well, and they really bring a sense of like fun. Like, they love doing it, which is so nice to see, because sometimes wrestlers don't seem to have much passion for what they're doing, or they're worried to seem like they're having fun. I will admit that, like, they do seem like they're kind of coasting right now.
Yeah, that's kind of true.
There's not a whole lot of new stuff from the Young Bucks, but I still think they're on top of their game. And like, really, I mean, the Briscoes are also really good, but I mean, you talk about coasting. The Briscoes have been doing the Briscoe thing for a long time. There's not a lot of fresh tag teams outside the WWE right now. So that's why this was sort of the hardest category, I think, for us.
It's true. This was probably the hardest one, if only because like the choices were really slim. Like, just thinking of tag teams was hard.
And there are like there are good tag teams here in the Northeast. Like, I briefly thought about EYFBO, that Mike Drastic and Angel Ortiz, but like, they're not that well known outside the Northeast yet. They have to do more. I would just feel like I was kind of picking hometown favorites. And this is a very prestigious award, and so we've got to take it with deadly seriousness. So speaking of prestigious awards, our next category is the best wrestler on Twitter, and the answers for this year are the exact same as they were last year.
They have not changed, but these are unanimously our 2 favorite wrestlers on Twitter.
If you only follow 2 wrestlers on Twitter, these should be the 2 wrestlers you follow. You chose Kevin Owens, and I chose X-Pac. What do you like about Kevin Owens?
That he is like a ridiculous character on Twitter. Like, he is like a totally kayfabe, the whole thing. It's great.
Yes.
And he does it so well that people believe it's really him. Like, they don't think it's a character, which is amazing.
The best Kevin Owens Twitter moments are when, like, some fan, like, will take it too seriously and will call him a loser, or like, like, you're too scared to fight, and then he'll like get into a Twitter fight with these people.
Yeah, that kind of thing is great for him, because like because they take it seriously, and he replies like he's serious, and like it just perpetuates it.
I'm looking at his Twitter feed right now, and there's a guy whose avatar shows himself wearing sunglasses, and he says to Kevin Owens, "You're a coward. You're nothing on your own." And Kevin Owens responds, "At least I don't wear sunglasses indoors."
See, perfect.
He's a lot of fun. He really gets into it, and messes with people. And when he wants to be serious, he can be serious. There was a point where at one point this year, when Owens won the Universal Championship, his wife had a picture or a short video of her son reacting. Like, he's got a young son going nuts, and some ESPN personality said something like, "Oh, it's too bad this kid, thinks his father's stupid job is for real." And like, the wrestling Twitter went after this guy, and like, they were really going after him. And Owens was really classy about the whole thing, and like, he didn't get angry about it, and he was just like, the guy's a jerk, who cares what he thinks? And he's got a real good Twitter presence. It's very funny. I chose X-Pac, as I did last year, but this was really the year of X-Pac on Twitter, because this is going to sound weird, but it's 100% true. X-Pac had really thoughtful and informed things to say about the presidential election.
Yeah, X-Pac always it's weird because he does a lot of like political commentary, but he is actually really interesting the stuff he says. Like, I don't agree with everything he says, but like he's at least like well spoken about it. Says things that make sense, at least.
Yeah, even when I don't agree, it's clearly something that he is saying because he's thought about it. Like, he's done thinking. Whereas like some guy who tries to do that is Dolph Ziggler. If you follow him on Twitter, he tries to be like a political commentator. It's clearly just like stuff that he read other people say, and he's just parroting it. Whereas X-Pac is more like this is something thoughtful and something that he spent a lot of time thinking about. He's also funny. He's also like has a sense of humor and is not afraid to laugh at himself. But honestly, like I would on debate nights, I would go to X-Pac's Twitter feed because he would be live tweeting debates and he'd have like interesting things to say. He's kind of like libertarian leaning, so he doesn't really care for either major party in the U.S., which is refreshing. And yeah, X-Pac and Kevin Owens on Twitter, they get their mantles crowded with hardware should make room for new awards because they've both won. They're both repeat winners of the Best Wrestler on Twitter award.
They have to clear off their mantles for make a little bit more room for another award.
Make a little more room. Chuck Taylor was a very close competitor. He has a hilarious Twitter. He just doesn't tweet very much. That's his problem. But he's been relentlessly clowning his friend Johnny Gargano all year, and it's been a delight. So this is a slightly more august award. Best Wrestling Promotion. This is overall. In the entire world, what is the best wrestling promotion in 2016? Tell us about your choice.
I choose New Japan. New Japan does something that like I think other promotions don't do, or at least don't do as well, in that they have like a lot of really good talent and they use them in a way that like they always have really good matches. I mean, they're not perfect. It's like, you know, every card has like a 28-man tags on it, but like, you know, when they want to make the best show of the year, you know, they have Wrestle Kingdom. And like, if you want to compare Wrestle Kingdom 2016 to WrestleMania 2016, it's like the quality of the matches is so different.
Yep.
And you remember WrestleMania 2016? It was terrible. It was like the worst WrestleMania in recent memory. It was really bad. And Wrestle Kingdom though was amazing. And like Wrestle Kingdom consistently has, you know, most of the match of the year contenders like straight off. It's the kind of show that like only New Japan could put together, I think, and they do it so well that, you know, it's hard to not think of like, you know, despite like some issues. Obviously, every promotion has issues, but like when they're on, they're really on. And when they're doing something, when they got something going together, well, it's they capitalize on it. And I think like beyond that, they've also been able to, you know, take people like Kenny Omega, who was like formerly like kind of a mid-card dude, and make him into a star. Like when's the last time WWE has done that? Just take someone from their mid-card and within the year make them the top guy.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good choice. I went a little more craft brewed, a little more artisanal, a little more locavore. I picked Beyond Wrestling as my best wrestling promotion of 2016. That is an East Coast promotion based in New England, similar in a lot of ways to Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and how they present their show. It's sort of like where the upper crust of the indie wrestlers go to work when they're on the East Coast, or the Northeast, I should say. And this was the year they really kind of broke out of their like one show a month PWG-esque existence. They did a lot more shows. They traveled over to England. They did shows outside New England. They did 2 iPay-per-views. And they really kind of established themselves as a place not just where like top indie guys like Chris Hero would come and do shows, but also as like an incubator for new talent. Like there were some real people who had breakout years, like Keith Lee and Jonathan Gresham and Leo Rush, and in large part because of the matches they had at Beyond Wrestling. For me, they have a lot of freshness. PWG is so great, but to me, it's kind of getting formulaic. Like it's the same thing over and over. And Beyond Wrestling it felt a lot more fresh to me, a lot more willing to experiment, a lot more willing to bring new people into it. Like PWG is like the same guys plus whoever is like kind of a top. Like one year they had a bunch of Lucha Underground guys, this year they had a bunch of British guys. It's sort of like it's their stable of guys plus whatever is kind of trendy at the moment. Whereas like Beyond Wrestling has given spots to up and coming New England wrestlers like Keith Lee, who no one had heard of before, but the promoter Drew Cordero just knew the guy was a giant and was really good. And I like that. And I like that they're also they do things like they'll have multiple matches on a card with women wrestlers. They mix that in. To me, they're doing everything right. You know, there's stuff I would change. I thought the whole controversy with Joey Styles was overblown, and I don't think Joey Styles should have lost his job anywhere except Evolve. But I've enjoyed every Beyond Wrestling event I've gone to, even like the marathons where I'm on my feet for 8 hours. I think that for 2016, especially if you're talking about indies, people have had as good years, but nobody had a better year.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. They also got on that streaming service too, so now they're more visible to people who aren't in the Northeast.
That's the thing. You can now watch on Flow Slam some Beyond Wrestling. And in fact, if you watch the most recent show they did on Flow Slam, Overnight Sensation from Melrose, Massachusetts, I'm facing the hard camera for the entire show, so you will see a lot of Pepper Tom if you watch on Flow Slam. So this was another difficult category because I saw a lot of good matches as I had a hard time narrowing it down, and you went to the New Japan show, which had a lot of good matches. Best live match of the year.
Okay, so you had much more to choose from than I did because I only went to one show this year.
Well,
but I will pick a 6-man tag match with let's see, we had Kazuchika Okada and Will Ospreay and Hiroki Goto, who representing the Chaos faction in New Japan, versus the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, who were dressed as Ghostbusters and a ghost.
That's awesome.
This was part of the New Japan's Halloween show. And it was not only was it a good match, it was really entertaining. The whole beginning part with the Ghostbusters thing was really entertaining too. But the quality of the wrestlers in the match made it a really great match, and it was a lot of fun to watch. So I chose that.
I had a hard time narrowing it down. I went to a lot of shows this year. I went to, I think, 32 shows, which is a lot. And I saw a lot of good matches. I did not see Will Ospreay live. I've never seen him live, so I'm jealous of you. But for me, I think the best match I saw live this year was at a Beyond Wrestling show called Flesh, which is a dumb name, in Melrose, Massachusetts. It is an iPay-per-view, so you can see it. I think you can see it on FlowSlam, or you can see it on the WWN Live, because it was before FlowSlam. It was Zack Sabre Jr. versus Jonathan Gresham. And this has been the year of grapple fuck, I think, in a lot of ways. And this match was so good, and it was like a 25-minute match between two guys who are submission wrestlers and whose style would not have been out of place in the 1960s. And it was just a great, like, hard-fought, gritty, stiff, snug wrestling match on a hot summer day when you could see the, like, sweat flying off the guys when they were landing chops. And both guys were so evenly matched in their skills that, like, you really had no idea who was going to win. It was a great show from start to finish. I was completely riveted by it. I don't keep spreadsheets with, like, star ratings for matches or something, but this was definitely a 5-star match for me. I loved it. And it's funny to think that before 2016, I had kind of resigned myself to the fact that I would never see Zack Sabre Jr. in person because I didn't think any indie in the area would bring him over. And, like, I ended up seeing him so many times in 2016 that by the end of the year I was skipping shows that he was in. But I love this match. You should be able to check it out online on the either FlowSlam or WWN Live. I don't know how it comes across on TV, but I think if I was going to talk to somebody and say, like, this is what someone who's never seen wrestling before and who probably thinks of it as like oily muscle men having like ridiculous pose offs, I would say this is like the state of the art of professional wrestling. It's two guys who are not giants. They're not like big bodybuilder types. They have like they're in good shape, but they're like average builds, and they're so skilled at professional wrestling. They just draw you in and it was a 25-minute match. I didn't look at my watch once. I was like riveted from start to finish.
That's how you choose a good match, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the next category for me was an even harder one, but I think you have a choice that is probably the most sensible one. This is the best match on television.
Best TV match, easy choice for me. I chose the Final Deletion.
That's a great choice. Tell us why Final Deletion was the best match on TV.
Final Deletion, not only did it kick off the whole deletion thing, but it was so like out of left field, the kind of thing where like you didn't expect something like this to happen, and then suddenly it's amazing. It has so many like quotable things, lots of fun little clips from it. The magnificent xylophone.
It was the first wrestling match in a long time to like spawn memes.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that like it spawned memes. That's the thing, but like also it's entertaining from start to finish. It's the kind of thing where it's new. It's kind of it feels fresh. It's really weird. It's the kind of thing like it hits all the right buttons for me. So like having the Final Deletion show up is the kind of thing where it's like I can't believe this great thing happened, but I can't believe it's from TNA.
Yeah. And I can't believe it's the Hardys.
Yeah, that all of those things, like they're all shocks because it's the like never in my life had I been a Matt Hardy fan until now.
Yeah, we don't our award categories. We don't have anything like comeback player of the year, but if we did, he would definitely be the winner. Like nobody had a more surprising 2016 than Matt Hardy.
That's absolutely true. If you had asked me a year ago, what would have to happen for you to like Matt Hardy? I wouldn't have had an answer. I wouldn't have been able to tell you what possibly it could have been. But Matt Hardy showed me.
If you had said to me in January, Shinsuke Nakamura is going to sign with WWE, and at the end of the year, Matt Hardy will be one of your favorite wrestlers, I would have like believed you on Nakamura. I would have been like, I guess so. But the Hardy thing, I would have been like, there's no way on earth that's going to happen. And yet, Matt Hardy is currently one of my favorite wrestlers. I think the subsequent installments of the Deletion trilogy suffered a little bit because you knew what to expect, and I think Final Deletion was the best one because it was the whole thing was so weird and such a surprise, and everything about it was delightful. From like the lawnmower to the drone to Rebby playing her part as like the kind of conniving, scheming wife, even Senor Benjamin. Like it wasn't
Benjamin.
It wasn't
So
like
good.
a traditional match, you know.
But yeah, it's also the thing where like they brought back all those weird other Hardy characters, Itchweed and stuff like.
Yeah, right. Willow came back, and it was a lot of fun. And the fact that it was on TNA, and the fact that it was the Hardys, just completely fearlessly trying something new and having it pay off was great. I can't really argue with that, although I did, and I chose a much nerdier best TV match of 2016. This was a hard one for me because I thought like there were so many great matches in the Cruiserweight Classic. I wanted to pick one of those, but honestly, there were so many great ones that they start to blend together after a while. And they're all like not all of them. Some of them were not great matches, but there were really good ones. But it was all sort of part of like one self-contained story. And another competitor for me was the Revival DIY 2 out of 3 falls match at TakeOver Toronto.
That was
like
a really
that,
good match.
That was a great and you like we had said, you could show that match to anyone, any wrestling fan in the last 60 years, and they would love it. But ultimately, I went with keeping in mind our male wrestler of the year. I went with AJ Styles versus John Cena at SummerSlam. And this was a great match because they had a feud going into this where Styles had been winning either by cheating or having the club help him out. And I mean, this was a great match from start to finish. This was a really great WWE big show match. Not a big show match, but a match at a big important show. And both guys did great. You know, they traded finishers. It was kind of like a PWG thing where, like, after a while, it was like, what will it take? And there were a lot of close calls. And going into this, one of the things that was really important was I genuinely had no idea who was going to win. And when AJ Styles won clean, that was such a great booking decision. And the way they had, like, John Cena take his armband off, his never give up armband off, and, like, just leave it in the ring and, like, walk away was such good storytelling at a very high level. And it's the kind of thing that WWE normally doesn't do. So I loved it. I thought it was great because it made you care about the outcome of the match. It made you realize how big the outcome was. And it was the right call to have AJ Styles win clean. All it does is just set up, like, you know, an encounter down the line. But I thought for, like, a big TV match where a lot of people are watching and, like, sort of wrestling at its most broadly appealing, that to me was the best match on TV of the year.
Yeah, I mean that was a really good match. I agree with that. I think also the end of the end with John Cena dropping the armband was pretty good.
Yeah, and it was also good. I mean, this wasn't part of the match, but it was good that the follow up wasn't, because, you know, Vince gets skittish, and, like, we were half expecting the follow up to be Cena shows up on SmackDown on Tuesday and, like, beats AJ Styles, and that didn't happen. He was just gone. I mean, he was gone because he was shooting a movie or whatever, or doing a TV show. But it was great that they had, like, it wasn't just another match. It was like John Cena, he was the guy who always wanted to do the right thing, and he stands up for goodness and justice and all that, and he's only been losing because this guy's a cheater, and there's no way that he can beat John Cena one-on-one, and then he does, and it completely shakes Cena's, like, view of the world. Like, that's just good storytelling. So I like that. I thought that was really good, and it helps further cement AJ Styles as the top guy. Stepping a little bit outside the ring, this is the biggest wrestling news story of the year. Once again, we are unanimous in our choice.
So, yeah, easily the biggest wrestling news story of the year, the one we talked about the most, the Hulkster versus Gawker. That was big news, but this is the Hulkster destroyed Gawker. I mean, just big boot and leg drop, out of business.
This was the real Final Deletion match.
Yeah, this was the actual Final Deletion of Gawker, who lost the court battle for $120 million or something, and they appealed and then ended up settling for somewhere in the tens of millions, which is amazing, surprising, and Gawker is out of business, gone. It's no longer a site. You can go to Gawker.com right now, and there's just a message saying Gawker is no longer a site. So that's it.
It's hard to overstate how big this was. In the United States, it's very difficult to sue media organizations. And Gawker was such an important player in establishing the tone and style of online journalism. A lot of online journalism in the U.S. and Britain has a Gawker style to it. And a lot of Gawker alums are big publications now. And it was a real trendsetter and a big part of the New York media world. And nobody thought that Hogan was going to prevail. Or Hogan and Peter Thiel, the sort of evil vampire billionaire who was funding the lawsuit. But they did. And they did for a couple of reasons. Gawker made a lot of mistakes. They did because the trial was in Florida and not New York. It was a jury trial, not a judge trial. And Gawker was really, their people were really flippant about the whole thing. And got tripped up by Hogan's lawyers, who were very, very good, and they ultimately the jury rendered a verdict. They couldn't pay the bond on the verdict, and that was it. They filed for bankruptcy. They're now owned by Univision, I think.
Yes, that is true.
It's part of the Gawker Media is owned by Univision. Gawker, the website, as Joe said, is no more. So this was a huge. I mean, this is a hugely consequential. There were people who were saying like this is the end of the First Amendment in the U.S., which is ridiculous. It's not that. It's the end of an era for digital media, one style of digital media, and it's all because they did not heed the lesson of what happens when Hulkamania runs wild on you.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do when Hulkamania runs wild on you? Is
File for bankruptcy protection.
That's it. File for bankruptcy and close down because there's no handling Hulkamania, and Hulk Hogan proved it again.
Hulk Hogan does not do a job for anyone. Yeah. They could have asked anybody in WCW. Hulk Hogan does not lay down for anybody, brother.
That's right. So I don't know why they didn't realize that going into this lawsuit, but Hulk Hogan doesn't lose.
So I think that was the biggest wrestling news story. This is positive. We do things that are positive. There's a lot of best, but we did want to say one worst. So our least favorite thing, or a couple least favorite things, and talk about the worst angle of the year. And there were some real competitors.
There were a lot of bad angles. Not even remotely as close to as many as last year, though.
No, last year was like a real cornucopia for bad angles.
But this year, I just want to say like the worst thing as far as the angles go is like basically what they've done with Seth Rollins since his return, and they basically botched his face turn. Like,
yeah.
They did that. Okay, remember when Seth Rollins he was injured, and then when he was in recovery, they were doing like that sympathetic, like, here's Seth Rollins going through his recovery on the network.
Yep.
And then like when he came back, he was just a heel again. Like, what are you doing? Like that doesn't make any sense because like, you go through the trouble of getting people invested in his comeback, like including making a special on the network about the dude, and then like when he comes back, he's not the face that everybody. I mean, the crowd erupted. They wanted to cheer for him. If they had just like said, "Oh, yep, he's a face now," at that point, he would be huge right now. And instead he just went back to being the same character he was before, and then like his inevitable face turn was just this kind of like goofy thing where, oh, I guess Triple H isn't my buddy anymore. I guess I'm a face now.
Yeah.
That was kind of it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just really dumb. And they could have, like, I know they want to have an eventual Seth Rollins versus Triple H match. At least they had wanted to. And I think, like, what better opportunity would it have been to have him come back as a face and then just like, have Triple H be angry at him for betraying him or whatever. I mean, it's like such a simple story that they could have just went with, but instead he floundered about for a couple of months and then like half-heartedly became a face, and it just lost all the impact. So like now he's just kind of like, he feels like a mid-card guy now.
Yeah, I agree. I was going back over some of the stuff I had written on closetofanxiety.tumblr.com when I was trying to figure out like my best and worst of the year and everything. And like back at SummerSlam, I was talking about how bored I was with Seth Rollins. He really has not. They had a great golden opportunity with his comeback, and they just completely blew it. You're absolutely right. They're leaving money on the table. Like it's not just a sort of a creative thing. It's like you could have established this guy as like the new up and coming star. It's badly need to do.
Yeah, and then they just ruined it with the way they brought him back. So like they had like a really good chance. It's not like he has no chance now. It's not like they killed him, but it's just like you had a perfect shot and you just threw it away. So now you have to actually work hard.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do, but that is a great worst angle. Um, I for mine I chose and maybe this is just because it's recent, it's fresh in my mind, but I can't get over, I can't explain how much I hate the like Rusev is a bad guy for defending his wife against the creepy rapey attentions of Enzo Amore. And not just that, like the whole like Rusev is a bad guy because he loves his family. Rusev is a bad guy because he's proud of where he comes from. Like all this stuff that you qualities that you would want as a person. Rusev is a bad guy because he has them because he's a foreigner. Like that's all it boils down to in Vince McMahon's weird 1950s brain. Um, that like you can't be a good guy unless if you're a foreigner, unless you're like a maybe from the British Isles. Maybe if you're Irish, you're probably a villain. Um, and if you're English, you will be a villain. You'll be a cape wearing weird villain before long. I just kind of hate it. I think it's like a weird pale imitation of Attitude Era stuff, and maybe it's just because I've become like an Attitude Era hot taker, and that I'm constantly telling people how bad it was, and this just sort of reminds me of some of the stuff I hated during the Attitude. It's not as bad. It's not as bad as the Attitude. It couldn't be, but it's just I stuff I genuinely hated from that time in wrestling is now being sort of imitated in this dumb on the third carbon version.
Yeah, it honestly does feel that way too. Um, when I see those skits with Enzo, I always think like this feels like the worst parts of the Attitude Era stuff. Which feels like it. You know, did you guys ask Vince Russo to write this part?
Right.
Because it's kind of how it feels.
Oh God, Vince Russo. Yeah. Yeah, that is how it feels. Like you could see Vince loving it. You could see Vince watching and being like, "Now this, bro, this is good TV, bro." Our last category. It's a negative Nelly. We'll wrap this up on a positive note, so you're not going away feeling unhappy.
Yeah,
But
you don't want to leave the podcast feeling bad about
no.
wrestling or about yourself because
No,
this is actually a category about you, the listener. No, it's
we
not.
haven't
I'm just kidding.
if you leave feeling bad. But our last formal category is the least welcome trend or development, and we said a development as least welcome. This was unanimous. We agreed the least welcome development in wrestling this year was the departure of Billy Corgan from TNA, which is a weird thing to say.
Yeah, it's the kind of sentence you think nobody would ever have said ever.
And also, like you and I have been aggressively ignoring Billy Corgan's music for over 20 years at this point.
Yeah,
we're not huge Smashing Pumpkins fans or something like that. We're quite the opposite. But you have to hand it to Billy Corgan. He actually really knows how to make an entertaining wrestling show.
It's true. This is because of Billy Corgan, it was the first time in a long time that TNA had been actually entertaining.
And you had talked about Final Deletion, and that was apparently all Billy Corgan pushing it. Dixie Carter was really skeptical about it, and Billy Corgan was like, "Let's just run with it." A lot of the stuff that made TNA briefly entertaining this year was because Billy Corgan was willing to take chances and do things that were different from how they had been done.
But also, I mean, the thing with it also was that you see exactly what Billy Corgan is talking about. Like recently, he had an interview where he was saying the way that we should be promoting wrestling is different. It's a new era. We should be using the internet more. We should get things to be more viral. And you saw when Final Deletion came out, what did they do with it? It was online in its complete form, and you could watch it for free online, and it created a huge amount of buzz. And you saw in the ratings for TNA that the ratings went up. So it's the kind of thing where, they did a lot of those kind of internet-only skits that weren't on the show. I mean, they were only on the internet. And, before they had the initial final deletion, there were all those like 5 minutes of Matt Hardy staring at the camera or whatever skits. Remember?
Oh my god, so good.
And those kinds of things were like exactly the kind of things that Billy Corgan was talking about for in that interview when he was talking about like what he wanted to do with TNA and what he wants to do going forward with wrestling. So it actually makes sense when you see how it turned about, how like Final Deletion blew up, that Billy Corgan actually knows what he's talking about, and losing him in TNA is like a, bad news for TNA, but maybe good news for some other company who picks him up, because I think he knows what he's doing.
There's talk that he's been meeting with Ring of Honor. They could really use an injection of new ideas right now.
Yeah, I mean, because like think about this. Last year, like one of the only unanimous things we had on the list was like the best wrestling promotion was Ring of Honor, and this year, like it wasn't even a contender.
Yeah, I mean, it really. People have been online. Some of the wrestling GIFer accounts have been putting up these GIFs of like classic era Ring of Honor with like when Samoa Joe is there and Jack Evans and Daniel Bryan, American Dragon, I guess, Bryan Danielson, and just like watching these and then going and finding like the matches online and stuff. It's like that was so fun. It was just like they were so wide open and they tried so many different things, and it's become really stale. And the matches are still good. Like it's not like there's bad matches. It's just there's like, when was the last time you were really surprised by Ring of Honor? It's been a while.
Excited by Ring of Honor, even.
We're excited. Yeah.
It's the kind of thing like like what's even going on in Ring of Honor now? It's the kind of thing where like none of it is memorable enough to keep up with, and it was previously. It was a lot more interesting, but now it's just kind of stagnating, and it's too bad, because like as we said last year, it was our best promotion of the year, and this year it's like not even on the in contention.
No, I don't even know if I'd put it in the top 5. Even like taking the WWE out of the equation, like I could name 5 promotions that had better years than were more interesting wrestling than Ring of Honor. Like big ones like New Japan, CMLL, and then smaller ones like
even TNA.
Even TNA, yeah. Which, the year didn't end well because Billy Corgan departed. But, like, in terms of the stuff they put on TV in 2016, a lot of it was really, really good. Which is a shocking thing to say about TNA. Because if you go back and you watch those TNA matches from the same era, these, those classic Ring of Honor things are being gifted online, like, there's no way to be nostalgic for that era of TNA. Like, oh man, we need Puppet the Psycho Dwarf. We need him back. So we don't want to end things on a bummer note. We don't have categories, but I thought it'd be nice to just talk about some of the other things that were notable that we liked in 2016, and just a couple things for me that spring to mind. I liked the explosion of like streaming services in wrestling. Whereas, we've said this a million times and we're broken records about it, but when we were getting into like indie wrestling and stuff, way back in the Stone Age, the only way you could either pay to see stuff live, like you could go to shows that were live, which meant you were pretty much limited by geography, or you could buy VHS tapes from shady bootlegger guys, some of whom delivered good stuff and some of whom delivered like 5th generation dubs of AAA television shows that aren't with no English subtitles. You had no idea what you were watching because it was like through a layer of murk. And
I have some of those.
Yeah, I do too. And today, like in 2016, you've got obviously the network, which got the ball rolling. But now, you have High Spots, you have Flow Slam, Powerbomb TV is starting next year. And a lot of the bigger promotions have their own streaming. Like, there's a ton of good, like, there's too much wrestling to watch. New Japan World, NWA Classics, like, there's so much good wrestling that's so accessible, and really for not that much money, that, like, you have to make choices about what wrestling you want to see. Like, there's too much good stuff out there. It's a great problem to have.
There's too much wrestling.
There's too much wrestling. I also liked, I I like the way that women's wrestling was coming along in the U.S. in 2016. Like it's being presented ever more the way that women's wrestling is presented in Japan, which I think is the way to do it, as in it's just good wrestling. I mean, there's always going to be kind of like a, hey, look at these attractive women element to it, but that's also part of men in wrestling. Like, don't fool yourselves that like those guys need to wear briefs. Like there's a reason for it, and that's fine. But it's not being portrayed like in the freak show Jello battle way it was during the Attitude Era.
There's no bra and panties matches.
No, and there's not like an afterthought quality. Like even indie shows, you're seeing more and more women on the card, and that's what has to happen for women to make a living at this. Like there has to be more slots for them as wrestlers, so they don't have to do those weird custom tapes anymore. That stuff's creepy. And then just for me, like some bright spots, like the Cruiserweight Classic was really, really good.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. The Cruiserweight Classic was not only was it a shock, like it was kind of a surprise that it was sponsored by WWE, but like it really delivered with the matches and with the talent that they got.
Yeah, I mean, how weird to see Kota Ibushi and Zack Sabre Jr. on WWE programming.
Yeah, it's really strange, and both of those guys turned down contracts.
Yeah, it did. That was a bright spot for me too. I mean, honestly, the way that WWE has been signing people, I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad people are getting a big platform. But as a fan of independent wrestling and wrestling in other countries, it does sort of worry me. Every once in a while, you think, like, well, who's going to be left? But it just means that more opportunities are created. Like when AJ Styles went to WWE, Kenny Omega stepped up to the big spot. So, I mean, it's not like there's a lack of talent out there. I'll say I liked. I saw a lot of wrestlers this year who I really, really liked. Leo Rush blew me away. I think that guy has a really bright future. Keith Lee, who I've talked about, Joey Janela, who I don't think he gets a lot of attention outside the Northeast, but he has it all. He's a tremendous wrestler, but he has a great character, incredible personality, and he makes the most hilarious vignettes. Like they're like semi-serious, but really kind of goofy and corny. Where like, he's like walking alone on the boardwalk on the beach in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and like staring out at the sea, and and then like he sees a dead body in the sand under the boardwalk, and he walks over to investigate, and he looks, and the dead body is him, and like then he wakes up in bed. It's like I love it. He's a madman and has to stop taking so many insane risks in death matches. But like when there are guys like that who just love it and who give their all, it's an exciting time for wrestling.
So, I mean, it's really true. There have been a lot of good things like that. And 2016. One of the best things about 2016 was like how WWE turned around. Because remember last year at the end, it was like for like mostly all of 2015 really, how awful WWE was, and even the beginning of 2016 it was bad up until WrestleMania. And then after WrestleMania, after that awful WrestleMania, it was like night and day. It was like someone flipped a switch to good, and like remember how we'd have to like really struggle to find something good about Raw, and then like after WrestleMania, it was like a struggle to find something bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They really, I mean, there were some down spots for them, but I mean, this year comparison to 2015 was night and day. I mean, if WrestleMania 2016 had been better, it would have been a really much more dramatic. But you're right, that's a good point. WWE has mostly been fun to watch this year, which was not the case last year.
Yeah, it's one of the most positive things is like how well the turnaround for WWE went. Like they really turned it around in a way that is good. I mean, they made it so that like instead of like being a bit of a chore to watch Raw, it actually is a lot of fun now. And like it's not that every show is spectacular, because like there have been some not so great ones as of late, but like even then, like those not so good shows are much rarer than the bad shows, the or the good shows, I mean. So it's the kind of thing where you have it's really nice to watch those shows now and have like be like, I'm actually excited to watch Raw now, instead of like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching Raw again.
Yeah, I honestly, I think one of the biggest factors, it feels weird to say this because we were kind of skeptical when this happened, was I think the brand split has been really good.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think the brand split has been really, really, really good.
They actually do have sort of the shows have distinctive personalities, and like it has led to, honestly, some of like the must-see viewing of WWE programming every week is the Talking Smack show with Daniel Bryan and Renee Young. Like that has produced some of like the best microphone work of anyone, and it really like it helped elevate The Miz, who I think has had a great year. Really, if it wasn't for Matt Hardy, like I would argue The Miz has had like the best sort of comeback of anyone. He's been like one of the best villains in WWE, and a lot of it was because he got all this time on Talking Smack to like pick a fight with Daniel Bryan, and the brand split has made that possible. It's really sort of I think heightened the quality of the show. And you had talked about this at length, and I think absolutely rightly, is before the brand split there were just too many people. And like they were all in one roster. There was no differentiation. There was no mid card. And now with the two brands, it's really more distinctive. And some people have really gotten a chance to sort of shine because they're not being suffocated in this gigantic mid card the way they used to be.
Yeah, definitely The Miz is one of those people too. That's another development in 2016 that was like a shock. You're gonna enjoy The Miz. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, who would have believed rather, if someone had told us in December of 2016 you will be talking about how much you like Matt Hardy and The Miz, and my response would be, why did they leave wrestling and do something else?
did they leave wrestling and form a comedy duo? What's going on?
Yeah, no, but they have both been outstanding performers, and really, WWE has gotten so much better in 2016, and that is a real bright. And like when WWE is better, everybody else is better. Honestly, they're sort of they're the big horse. They're the one who's pulling the cart for a lot of people. And the fact that this year they've been really willing to embrace the indies. Remember when we started this podcast, we talked about how Triple H would give these interviews saying the Performance Center was going to be their way to bypass the indies entirely. They weren't going to need to take people from the indies. They were going to be able to mold their own superstars, and that attitude is out the window. I mean, they're signing everyone, and not just from the indies, from like TNA, from New Japan. Like they have finally realized, and this has helped their product a lot. They finally realized that if you want good wrestlers, just go out and hire people who are already good wrestlers.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
Don't get like a college football player and think you can turn that person. Sometimes it works. Absolutely, sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't work. Whereas someone like Kevin Owens, who had already been doing it and doing it very well, or Nakamura, who's doing it at a very high level, like just hire them. Just pay the people who are already doing it well. But yeah, honestly, like a lot of stuff to be positive about. If you were a wrestling fan and nothing happened in 2016 that you loved, you should reevaluate why you like wrestling, because maybe there's nothing for you.
Yeah, I mean, there was something for everyone, I think, and there was some stuff for people who don't even like wrestling.
Right, absolutely. One thing, this is sort of like has been bubbling under, that wrestling has been gradually catching on in the mainstream, in places where it hadn't before, and I think that's a hugely good sign. You know, when you have like Tony publications like the New York Observer reviewing Evolve shows, or like the Final Deletion stuff that like really kind of crossed over and became sort of the fodder for memes, I think it's really, really, and like, you know, Sports Illustrated and Vice and ESPN and all kinds of mainstream outlets are regularly covering wrestling. that is just helping it. Like it's just helping to put more eyeballs on the product and to show people who think they don't like wrestling that actually there's a lot you might enjoy about wrestling if you just give it a chance.
Yep, I think that's absolutely true. And, this year has brought a lot of variety for that. So, like, there's a chance that, like, even if you are a lapsed wrestling fan, you can come back to something that you'll find that you enjoy.
Absolutely. That's our message of hope for 2016.
I guess for 2017, I guess. Since 2016 is basically over. So I think that's all we've got for this show, right, Tom?
I think that's it. This will be the last you hear of us in 2016. So we hope if you're celebrating holidays, you had good ones, and we hope you have a good new year. We'll be back next week with our predictions for 2017, and hopefully they will go smoother than our predictions for 2016, which did not go smoothly.
Hopefully Tom won't curse another wrestler. Though it may be too late.
If you've listened to the podcast, you know that Joe has the power to make bad booking happen by predicting it in advance. Whatever like the worst possible outcome of a storyline can be, Joe will predict it and then it will happen. That's his horrible superpower in wrestling. Mine is by predicting great things for wrestlers, I curse them to terrible injuries. We're kind of a disastrous duo. But, so tune in anyway, because you may want to know which of your favorite wrestlers will have career-shortening injuries solely because of my praise.
That's a must-listen.
So, again, thank you, everybody. Hope you had a good year. And if you want more wrestling content, you can find us on the old Twitter machine. I am at TJ Breen. Joe is at XCornMuffinX. Over on the Tumblr, lot of content on the Tumblr. You can find me at closetofanxiety.tumblr.com, and you can find Joe at hokaginjoe.tumblr.com. Right now, just looking at Closet of Anxiety, I have a hilarious 1980s Four Horsemen T-shirt up, which makes it look like Tully Blanchard and Ric Flair have lipstick on for some reason. That was an interesting graphic design choice. There's some holiday themed stuff, including wrestlers from Georgia Championship Wrestling in the early 80s singing Deck the Halls. So good stuff abounds. And I believe it's in the description of the video, but if you like wrestling, you like reading about wrestling, you can head on over to Amazon.com, or actually I think even like other online retailers now, and buy Three Moves of Doom, which is a chat book. Stories by myself, by Joe, by acclaimed horror writer Matthew M. Bartlett, all about the grapple game, the Squared Circle pro wrestling. I think that's it. Am I missing anything? Am I missing any plugs?
I don't think so. I think that's it. So that's the end. We're done. We'll see you guys in 2017.
Thanks, everybody.